So let's just jump right in. When you hear the words divine revelation, what's the first thing that pops into your head? Probably words like guidance or mercy, right? But what about hardship? Today, we're going to dig into a really fascinating accusation that was thrown around at the very beginning of Islam, that the Quran was revealed for one simple reason: to make people miserable. Let's see what the sources have to say about that. So this was the actual claim from the pagans in Mecca. They were looking at the early Muslims, including the Prophet Muhammad himself, and seeing this intense, deep devotion. And that was their conclusion: misery. But what was it that they were really seeing? And that brings us to our first question: a revelation for misery? I mean, where did this idea even come from? It wasn't just some random insult they came up with. The sources tell us it was based on something very specific they were observing. Try to picture it, right? The whole city is asleep, it's dark and quiet, but this small group of people is awake, standing in prayer for hours, reciting these powerful new verses. Now, if you're an outsider looking in, what does that look like? It looks like pure exhaustion, like some kind of self-inflicted punishment. You'd probably think, wow, there's no way that's a path to happiness. That looks miserable. Okay, so how does the scripture itself answer this charge? Well, that brings us right to section 2, guidance, mercy, and healing. The Quran doesn't just ignore the accusation, it meets it head-on and clarifies its own purpose in the clearest terms possible. And here it is. This verse is a direct response. It's basically saying, nope, you've got it all wrong. Causing distress was never the point. Instead, the Quran says its purpose is something completely different. So, what is that purpose then? The sources lay it out so clearly. The Quran isn't meant to be a burden at all. It's actually presented as this multi-tool for your spiritual well-being. It's an admonition, sure, but it's also a healing for what's in your heart, a guidance for everyone, and a mercy for believers. And what's the end goal of all that? A path to real happiness. You've got this amazing contrast, right? The outside perception was misery, but the internal experience was all about mercy. And, this powerful internal experience, it wasn't just for believers. This is where the story gets really interesting. In our third section, The Secret Nightly Listeners, we find out that the Quran's pull was so strong, it even captivated its most vocal enemies. This leads to an incredible story about 3 of the most powerful leaders in Mecca. So get this, for 3 nights in a row, these 3 guys, who were public enemy number 1 for the early Muslims, all individually snuck out of their houses to secretly listen to the Prophet recite the Qur'an. They just couldn't stay away. And every single night, they'd accidentally bump into each other on the way home, get super embarrassed, and promise each other, okay, that's it, we're not doing this again. But the pull was just too strong. They kept coming back. Why? Well, the real reason finally comes out. One of them, Al-Aqnas, pulls Abu Jahl aside and basically asks him what's going on. And Abu Jahl, the Prophet's biggest hater, just confesses. It wasn't that he thought the message was false. It was all about tribal politics and pride. He said his tribe was always competing with the Prophet's tribe for honor, but a prophet who gets revelation from heaven? He just admitted, when could we ever match that? And honestly, this might be the most jaw-dropping part of the whole story. In that same private chat, Al-Aqnas asks him straight up, is Muhammad a liar? And Abu Jahl, the guy who spent all day publicly calling him a liar, admitted, by God, Muhammad is truthful, he has never lied. So their rejection had nothing to do with truth. It was all about power. They weren't rejecting the man. As the Quran itself says, they were rejecting the signs of God out of pure pride. But the pushback wasn't just coming from the outside. As we're about to see in our 4th section, The Danger of Extremism, another, more subtle challenge started to pop up from inside the community. A misunderstanding of what real devotion is supposed to look like. The sources draw a really sharp line here between a balanced, healthy practice, which is called the sunnah, and religious extremism, or glue. It's the difference between, say, praying and also resting, versus vowing you'll pray all night every night, or fasting and breaking your fast, versus vowing to fast forever. The key is following the Prophet's example, not trying to one-up him. So what exactly is this gulu? Well, you can think of it as going past the limits that have been set. It's when a person, usually with really sincere intentions, starts to forbid things that are totally permissible, or takes on such extreme acts of worship that they just become impossible to maintain. And the warning against this could not be more serious. The Prophet himself said that this exact thing, going to extremes in religion, is what destroyed the communities that came before.
So this isn't just a minor tip, it's framed as a massive danger to one's faith.
All right, so if the goal is not hardship and extremism is a huge red flag, then what's the actual path forward? The sources make it crystal clear. The real path is all about finding happiness through balance and ease. Take a look at this story. A companion named Muhammad was leading the prayer, but he made it so incredibly long that someone actually had to leave in the middle of it. When the prophet heard what happened, he was genuinely upset. He turned to Muhammad and asked him 3 separate times, as you can see here, "Are you putting the people to trial, Muhammad?" The big concern was that if you make worship too hard, you'll just end up pushing people away from it entirely. And this idea, this principle of ease or yusr, it comes up over and over again. The core teaching is that the religion is designed to be manageable. If you try to turn it into some kind of hardcore endurance test, it's gonna win and you're gonna burn out. The goal isn't one crazy burst of extreme devotion, it's a lifetime of consistent, sustainable practice. So, what does this balanced life actually look like? It's really, really simple. You pray, but you also sleep. You fast, but you also eat. It's this beautiful idea that your body has rights, your family has rights, and God has his rights. It's a holistic approach that weaves faith into your life instead of making your entire life collapse under the weight of rituals you can't keep up. And man, if you need any more convincing, just listen to this quote. It says it all. Abdullah ibn Amr was a young companion who was super zealous, and he took on these really extreme fasts and prayers. The prophet told him, hey, maybe scale it back a bit, but he insisted he could handle more. Decades later, as an old man, he looked back on his life and said he wished he had just taken the easier path the prophet had offered him. Which brings us right back to where we started. The sources argue that the whole point of Revelation from day one was never to create misery. It was to help people achieve sa'ada, that deep, peaceful, lasting happiness. It's a journey from darkness to light and from a feeling of burden to a sense of beautiful balance. And that really leaves us with something to think about, doesn't it? If the ultimate goal is balance, not burnout, where do we draw that line in our own lives? What's the difference between sincere, heartfelt devotion and the kind of spiritual excess that just leads to exhaustion? That's a question worth asking.